Princess Sua of the Celian hegemony felt like a beautiful bird in a very large, very quiet cage. Her world, Celes, was a place of gentle, glowing light and soft, whispering sounds. Everything was calm and orderly. The buildings were made of smooth white stone that seemed to glow from within. The trees had leaves of silver and light blue, and they moved slowly in a wind that never blew too hard. The people of Celes valued peace, grace, and good manners above all else. They spoke in quiet voices. They moved with smooth, flowing gestures. They never showed strong emotion in public. As the princess, the only daughter of the ruling family, Sua's life was the most orderly of all. Every day was the same. She woke at the same time. She ate the same delicate foods. She wore long, beautiful gowns that shimmered with their own soft light. She spent her days learning about history and art and diplomacy. She practiced the many complicated rules of royal behavior. She was like a perfect painting, lovely to look at but never moving, never changing, never making a sound. Today, however, was different. A new species had joined the galactic community. They were called humans. They were loud. They were energetic. And they were coming to Celes for a diplomatic visit. The whole palace was busy preparing. Sua's attendants, two women named Mija and Hyun, were carefully adjusting her gown for the big reception. "Stand still. Please, Your Highness," Mija said softly, her fingers fixing a fold of the fabric. Sua tried to stand still, but she felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. She had seen pictures of humans. They looked so solid. Their skin came in different shades, not the uniform pale silver of the Silesians. Their hair was often dark, not the flowing white common on her world. They seemed to have more energy even in the still images. "Do you think they will be difficult?" Sua asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hyun smiled a gentle, practiced smile. "They are different, Your Highness. But the Empire is skilled at handling different species. You simply need to be your graceful self. That is always enough." Sua nodded, but the flutter in her stomach did not go away. Being her graceful self was all she knew how to do. But for some reason, the thought of these humans made her wonder if it would be enough. The grand reception hall was the most beautiful room in the palace. The ceiling was a dome that showed a live image of the Silesian nebula, a swirl of soft pink and blue gas clouds. The floor was made of a clear crystal that showed slow-moving water and glowing fish underneath. Soft chiming music played in the air. The Silesian nobles stood in small groups, their conversations a quiet hum. They were all tall, slender, and elegant like reeds in a calm pond. Sua stood next to her father, the emperor, a tall and serious man with a long silver beard. She held her body in the perfect posture she had been taught since she was a child. Back straight, shoulders relaxed, hands folded gently in front of her. She was the picture of serene royalty. Then the doors opened. The human delegation walked in. The quiet hum of conversation stopped for a moment. The humans were not tall and slender. They were sturdy. They walked with a firm, confident step that echoed on the crystal floor. Their leader, a woman named Captain Jia, had a sharp, friendly face and dark hair cut short. She greeted the emperor with a short, respectful bow. Her movements were efficient, not flowing, but Sua's eyes were not on Captain Jia. They were drawn to the man standing just behind her. He was a warrior, a guard for the delegation. His name was Jun. He was not like the Silesian guards. The Silesian guards were also slender and wore light, form-fitting armor that was designed to look beautiful. Jun wore a simple gray combat suit. It was not shiny or decorative. It was practical, so I could see a few small scuffs and marks on it, as if it had been used many times before. He was not overly muscular, but he looked strong in a way that was very different from the Silesians. He looked dense like a stone from a riverbed. While the Silesian guards stood perfectly still, their faces calm masks, Jun's eyes were moving. They calmly scanned the room, looking at the people, the doors, the balconies. He was not being rude. He was just watching. He was alert. Sua had never seen anyone so alert in her life. In her world, everyone was relaxed. There was no need for such watchfulness. The emperor began his speech of welcome. Sua tried to listen, but her attention kept drifting back to the human warrior, Jun. He stood with his feet slightly apart, his hands relaxed at his sides. He looked comfortable and ready at the same time. It was a strange combination. Then it was time for the formal greetings. As the princess, it was her duty to welcome each member of the delegation with the traditional Silesian greeting. She moved down the line, offering a slow two-handed gesture. It was a movement that meant peace and welcome. Her hands flowed through the air like water. Each human she greeted bowed or nodded in return, looking a little unsure of the proper response. Finally, she stopped in front of June. She was closer to him now. She could see the details of his face. His jaw was strong. His eyes were a deep dark brown. He had a small straight scar above one eyebrow. She found herself wondering how he got it. She raised her hands to perform the greeting. "Welcome to Celis," she said, but her voice, which was usually clear and melodic, came out as a faint, breathy whisper. She hoped he had heard her. She looked up into his eyes as she made the gesture. For a moment, his scanning of the room stopped and his full attention was on her. It felt like a physical weight. His gaze was direct and intense. It was not the soft, respectful look she was used to. This was a look that saw everything. He did not bow. He did not try to copy her flowing hand movement. Instead, he did something simple. He brought his right hand up, made a fist, and placed it firmly over his heart. Then he gave a single, short, respectful nod. The gesture was so simple, so raw. It was not about beauty or grace. It was about respect coming from the heart, literally. It was the most honest greeting she had ever received. A warm flush spread across Sua's silver cheeks. She could feel the heat in her face. It was a sign of strong emotion, something a princess should never show in public. Horrified, she quickly dropped her gaze from his, finished her gesture, and moved away as smoothly as she could, her heart beating very fast inside her chest. For the rest of the reception, she tried to regain her composure. She sipped her sweet floral water. She made quiet conversation with other nobles. But her mind was not on her duties. It was on the human warrior standing silently by the wall. She watched him from a distance. He never fidgeted. He never looked bored. He just stood there, a quiet, solid presence in the room of soft light and gentle sounds. He was like a rock in the middle of a flowing stream. The water had to flow around him. He would not change for the water. Sua found this thought incredibly interesting. In her world, everyone changed to fit the situation. Everyone softened their edges to be more pleasing. This human June did not soften his edges. He was who he was. At one point, a young Silesian noble, a man named Day, bumped into June by accident. Day was holding a glass of shimmering juice. The liquid sloshed and a few drops landed on June's gray sleeve. Day was immediately flustered. "Oh, my deepest apologies. I am so clumsy," he said, his voice full of embarrassment. He pulled out a delicate silk cloth. "Please let me—" But June just looked at the small wet spot on his sleeve. Then he looked at Day and gave a small, almost invisible smile. "It is nothing," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble. "Do not worry." He gently waved away the silk cloth. Sua watched the whole event. Day was still apologizing, his face flushed with shame. But June had already dismissed it. He was not angry. He was not offended. For him, it was truly nothing. To a Silesian, a spilled drink at a formal event was a small social disaster. To this human, it was just a few drops of liquid on a uniform that had probably seen much worse. The reception finally ended. The human delegation was led to their guest rooms. The hall slowly emptied. Sua was finally able to go back to her own private rooms. Mija and Hyun helped her out of her heavy gown. "You did wonderfully, Your Highness," Hyun said. "You were the picture of grace." Sua did not answer. She walked over to her large window that looked out over the glowing city. The gentle lights of the buildings twinkled like fallen stars. It was a view she had seen every day of her life. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It was her home, but for the first time it felt a little bit quiet, a little bit too soft. She closed her eyes and saw not the soft lights of the city, but the direct, dark eyes of the human warrior. She felt again the warm flush in her cheeks when he had looked at her. She saw the simple, powerful gesture of his fist over his heart. A feeling stirred inside her, a feeling she could not name. It was not the calm serenity she was supposed to feel. It was something else. It was something warmer and stronger and a little bit frightening. The shy princess stood at her window, in her perfect gilded cage, and for the first time, she had found something on the outside that she desperately wanted to look at again. The peace of Celes was a deep and steady thing, like a silent song that played through the glowing streets and quiet halls. For a week, the human delegation had been guests in the palace, and a new, subtle rhythm had joined the old one. The solid sound of human footsteps now mixed with the soft shuffling of Silesian slippers. The low murmur of human voices blended with the gentle chimes of Silesian speech. Princess Sua moved through her days with the same grace as always. But underneath her calm surface, a storm of quiet feelings was brewing. Her thoughts kept returning to the human warrior June. She found herself looking for him in every room she entered. She would notice where he was standing, what he was doing. He was often near Captain Ga, his eyes always watching, always alert. He was so different from everyone else. The Silesian guards were like statues, beautiful and unmoving. June was like a mountain, solid and alive. He did not pretend to be part of the scenery. He was a presence. Sua's attendants, Mija and Hyun, noticed the change in her. She was more quiet than usual. Sometimes during her lessons she would stare out the window, not hearing a word her tutor said. "Is the princess feeling unwell?" Mija asked Hyun one day in a whisper. "She is just thoughtful," Hyun replied, but she also looked at Sua with a small frown of concern. The truth was, Sua did not feel unwell. She felt confused. She had been taught that strength was in calmness, in control, in never showing what you felt. But June's strength was a different kind. It was not about hiding. It was about being ready. It was a strength that admitted the world could be dangerous. This idea was both frightening and fascinating to her. One afternoon she was walking in the royal gardens. The gardens were a place of great beauty. Flowers made of light bloomed on twisting vines. Small, gentle animals with fur like white silk moved through the bushes. The air smelled sweet. Sua was supposed to be reading a data slate about interstellar trade agreements, but her mind was not on the words. She saw June. He was on a stone patio near the garden's edge performing his daily exercises. He was not running or lifting heavy things. Instead, his movements were slow and controlled. He would step forward, turn and move his arms in flowing circles. It looked almost like a dance, but a dance full of power and purpose. It was his Hapkido practice. Sua stopped walking. She stood behind a large glowing tree, hoping he would not see her. She watched him. His body moved with a balance that was perfect. Every motion was smooth and sure. He was completely focused on what he was doing. There was no one else in the world for him at that moment. She must have made a small sound, or perhaps he just sensed her. His movement slowed and he turned his head. His dark eyes found hers. Sua's heart jumped. She felt her face grow warm. She had been caught staring. This was terribly rude. A princess should not spy on a guard. But June did not look angry or annoyed. He simply finished his movement and stood up straight. He gave her a small, respectful nod. Feeling she had to say something, Sua stepped out from behind the tree. She held her data slate tightly in her hands. "Your movements are very interesting," she said. Her voice was soft and a little shaky. "It is a form of training," June said. His voice was calm and low. "It helps with balance and control. It looks peaceful," she said. "It can be," he agreed. "But its purpose is not peace. Its purpose is to be ready." "Ready for what?" Sua asked before she could stop herself. June looked at her directly. "For anything," he said simply. That one word, anything, sent a small shiver through Sua. In her world, they were only ready for one thing: more peace. The idea of being ready for anything was a vast and unknown concept. At that moment, a loud, sharp sound cut through the gentle air of the garden. It was an alarm. It was a sound Sua had only ever heard in drills. A red light began to flash at the garden's entrance. The peace of Celes was broken. Sua froze. Her mind went blank. The sound was so harsh, so violent against her quiet world. June was moving before the first echo of the alarm had faded. In one smooth, fast motion, he was at her side. His calmness was gone, replaced by a focused intensity. "Princess, we need to go. Now," he said. His voice was not loud, but it was firm and full of command. Before Sua could respond, two of her Silesian guards ran into the garden. Their faces were pale with fear, but they were trying to do their duty. "Your Highness, this way, we must get you to the safe room," one of them said, his voice high with panic. They moved to escort her, but June put a hand up. "Wait," he said. He was looking towards the palace, his head tilted as if listening. "The alarm is coming from the west wing. The main safe room is that way." "It might not be safe. The protocol is the safe room," the guard insisted. "The protocol is to keep her safe," June countered. "Is there another way?" The guards looked confused. They had only one protocol. They did not know what to do. Suddenly there was a crashing sound from inside the palace, followed by the high-pitched whine of an energy weapon. Someone screamed, "This way," June said. He did not wait for agreement. He took Sua's arm gently but firmly and guided her away from the palace deeper into the garden. Her Silesian guards, unsure of what else to do, followed them. They moved quickly along the winding paths. The beautiful glowing flowers and gentle animals now seemed strange and sinister under the flashing red alarm light. The sweet air smelled of smoke. They were heading for a small, secluded solarium at the far end of the garden. It was a building made of clear crystal, used for growing rare plants. It had only one entrance. Just as they reached the door, a figure dropped from the roof of a nearby archway. It landed without a sound. It was not Silesian, and it was not human. It was a Cathar. The Cathar were a species known for their aggression. They were tall and thin, with slick gray skin and long limbs. Their faces had no nose, just two slits, and their mouths were a wide line. This one held a long, humming blade made of purple energy. It was an assassin. The two Silesian guards immediately stepped in front of Sua, drawing their own elegant energy rapiers. Their hands were shaking. "Protect the princess," one of them shouted, his voice cracking. The Cathar moved. It was incredibly fast. It was like a blur of gray smoke. It swung its energy blade. The move was not elegant or precise. It was brutal and efficient. The first Silesian guard tried to block with his rapier. There was a loud crackle of energy, and the rapier was knocked from his hand. The Cathar kicked him in the chest, and he flew back, hitting a tree and slumping to the ground, unmoving. The second guard lunged forward, his rapier aimed for the Cathar's heart. The Cathar simply twisted its body, letting the blade pass harmlessly by. It grabbed the guard's arm and, with a sharp twist, broke it. The guard cried out in pain and fell to his knees. The Cathar knocked him on the head with the handle of its blade, and he too fell silent. It had taken only a few seconds. The two trained Silesian guards were defeated. They had never faced a real enemy before. Their beautiful formal fighting style was useless against this raw violence. The Cathar now turned its blank black eyes towards Sua. It took a step forward, its energy blade humming loudly in the sudden quiet. Sua was paralyzed with fear. She could not move. She could not breathe. She could only watch as death came for her. Then a gray shape moved in front of her, blocking her view of the assassin. It was June. He had not drawn a weapon. He stood between the princess and the Cathar, his feet planted firmly on the ground, his hands open at his sides. "Stay behind me," he said to Sua. His voice was still calm, but now it had an edge of steel. The Cathar made a chittering sound, a noise that might have been laughter. It saw that June had no energy weapon. It saw only a human in a simple gray suit. It lunged forward, its purple blade slicing through the air towards June's neck. June did not try to block the blade. He moved inside the swing. He stepped forward and to the side, his body flowing like water. The energy blade passed harmlessly through the air where his head had been. As the Cathar's arm extended, June grabbed its wrist with both hands. He did not try to stop the force of the lunge. He used it. He turned his body, pulling the Cathar's arm forward and down. He used the creature's own speed and strength against it. The Cathar was thrown off balance. It stumbled forward, and as it did, June drove his knee hard into its side. There was a sickening crunch. The Cathar let out a sharp gasp of pain. It was not a fight of weapons. It was a fight of bodies. June was a master of his own body, and he was using the Cathar's body against it. He moved with a power that was not about muscle, but about knowledge. He knew exactly where to push, where to pull, where to strike. The Cathar, enraged, swung its blade wildly. June ducked under the swing, came up close, and struck the creature's elbow with the heel of his palm. There was another loud crack. The Cathar's arm bent the wrong way. The energy blade fell from its limp fingers and vanished. Now the Cathar was weaponless and hurt. It was desperate. It lunged at June with its good arm, its sharp claws extended. June was ready. He caught the attacking arm, turned, and threw the Cathar over his shoulder. The creature slammed hard onto the crystal path. Before it could get up, June was on top of it. He did not use his hands. He did not need to. He had won, but the Cathar was not finished. It reached for a small device on its belt with its good hand. A bomb. June saw the movement. There was no time for a complicated move. In that single moment, the calm control was gone, replaced by pure protective instinct. His hand went to his boot and came up holding a simple, unadorned combat knife. It was just a piece of metal with a sharp edge. He did not hesitate. He drove the knife down. The struggle stopped. The Cathar lay still. June stood up. His chest was rising and falling steadily. He looked down at the fallen assassin for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned and looked at Sua. She was still standing where he had left her, her hands pressed to her mouth. Her whole body was trembling. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. She had just seen 2 of her guards defeated. She had just seen a creature try to kill her. She had just seen June fight, with a terrifying, brutal efficiency. But as she looked at him standing there calm and solid after the storm of violence, the cold knot of fear began to loosen. It was replaced by a wave of something else. It was not fear of him. It was awe. He had not fought for glory. He had not fought with anger. He had fought to protect her. His movements had been terrible and beautiful at the same time. "Are you hurt?" June asked, his voice returning to its normal, low calm. Sua could only shake her head. No, she was not hurt, but she was changed. The quiet, orderly world she knew was gone. In its place was a world where danger was real, and where strength was not just about grace but about action. And in the middle of this new, frightening world, there was a single, solid point of safety. His name was June. The silence after the attack felt different. It was not the peaceful quiet of Siles, but a heavy, waiting silence. The red alarm lights had stopped flashing, but the memory of their harsh glow remained. The palace guards moved through the halls with new tension in their bodies. Their elegant postures were now stiff with fear and uncertainty. Princess Sua sat in her private sitting room. The walls were a soft blue and a gentle light came from the ceiling. It was a room designed for calm and relaxation. But Sua could not relax. Her hands would not stop trembling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Cathar's blank face and the humming purple blade. She heard the terrible sound of the fight. Her father, the Emperor, had visited her. His face was pale and lined with worry. He had held her hands and told her she was safe, but his words felt empty. The palace, her whole world, no longer felt safe. The door to her room slid open without a sound. Mija and Hyon entered. Their usual gentle smiles were gone, replaced by looks of deep concern. "The Royal Council has made a decision, Your Highness," Mija said softly. "After what happened, they believe your personal guards need reinforcement." Sua looked up. "Reinforcement?" Hyun nodded. "They have asked the human delegation for assistance. The human warrior, June, has been assigned as your primary personal guard. He will be with you at all times." A strange feeling washed over Sua. It was a mix of relief and a new, different kind of nervousness. The thought of June being near made her feel safer than any number of Silesian guards. But the thought of him being near all the time made her heart beat in a funny, fluttering way. "Where is he now?" Sua asked. "He is waiting outside your door," Mija said. "He will accompany you wherever you go." Sua took a deep breath and stood up. She smoothed the folds of her simple day dress. She tried to make her face look calm and royal. She walked to the door and it slid open. June was standing there in the hallway. He was not leaning against the wall. He was not looking at a data slate. He was just standing ready. He wore the same simple gray combat suit. He turned his head as she appeared. "Princess," he said with a short nod. "Warrior June," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you for what you did. It is my duty," he said. His voice was not cold, but it was factual. He was stating a simple truth. This was the beginning of a new routine. Wherever Sua went, June was a few steps behind her. He was a silent, watchful shadow. At first, his presence made her more nervous. She was hyper-aware of every move she made. Was she walking gracefully enough? Was she speaking with the proper soft tone? She felt like she was constantly performing and he was the audience. But slowly, something began to change. His silence was not judgmental. It was just solid. His watchfulness was not intrusive. It was protective. The fear that had gripped her since the attack began to loosen its hold. When June was nearby, the world felt less dangerous. A few days later, she was in the royal gardens again. The damaged plants from the fight had been cleared away. New glowing flowers were already blooming in their place. Celes was good at hiding its scars. Sua sat on a stone bench trying to read a data slate about Silesian poetry. The words were beautiful and delicate, but they seemed to float away from her mind. She could not focus. Her eyes kept drifting to June. He was standing a polite distance away near a tree with silver leaves. He was not looking at her. He was scanning the garden, the windows, the sky. His eyes moved in a constant, calm pattern. She watched the way he stood. His feet were planted firmly, his weight balanced evenly. He looked unmovable. She remembered the feeling of being behind him when he faced the Cathar. She had never felt so safe in her life. She took a nervous breath. She wanted to talk to him, not as a princess to a guard, but just to talk. "Your fighting style," she said suddenly. Her voice sounded too loud in the quiet garden. June turned his head. His dark eyes focused on her. "Yes, princess?" "It is very different from ours," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "The Silesian way is like a dance. It is about form and beauty. Your way is different." June considered this for a moment. "It is called Hapkido," he said. "It is not about beauty. It is about using the energy you are given. If an opponent pushes you, you pull. If they pull, you push. You use their strength, not just your own." Sua thought about this. It was a completely new idea. On Celis, strength was something you built inside yourself and displayed with control. The idea of using an opponent's strength was foreign. It was clever. It was very effective, she said softly, looking down at her data slate. The memory of the fight made her cheeks feel warm. She stood up, wanting to walk a little. As she rose, her hand fumbled. The data slate slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the crystalline path. The sound was horribly loud and clumsy. A wave of embarrassment washed over her. A princess should never be so clumsy. She bent down quickly to pick it up, but June was faster. In a movement so smooth it seemed effortless, he was there. He knelt and scooped up the data slate before her fingers could even touch it. He stood and offered it back to her. "Thank you," she mumbled, her face now burning with a bright violet blush. She reached for the slate. As she took it, her fingers brushed against his. It was just the briefest touch. The contact lasted less than a second, but a jolt, like a spark of warm electricity, shot up Sua's arm. It was so sudden and so strong that she gasped softly and snatched her hand back, holding the data slate to her chest as if it were a shield. She could not look at him. Her heart was pounding. What was wrong with her? It was just an accidental touch. June did not say anything. When she finally dared to glance up, he was just looking at her. His face was as calm as ever, but there was a faint, almost invisible hint of something in his eyes. It was not a smile, but it was close. It was a look of understanding. Then as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by his usual professional calm. "You are not what I expected a human warrior to be," Sua said, the words tumbling out. She needed to say something, anything, to break the strange silence. June tilted his head slightly. "What did you expect?" "I do not know," she admitted. "Loudness, perhaps, anger. But you are quiet." "Strength has many voices, princess," he said. "Some are loud, some are quiet." He paused, looking at her not as a guard looks at a royal, but as one person looks at another. "And you," he said, his voice even softer now, "are far stronger than you look." Sua stared at him, completely speechless. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. People told her she was graceful, beautiful, kind, a perfect princess. No one had ever seen strength in her. She had never seen strength in herself. His comment was so unexpected, so personal, that it stole the air from her lungs. It felt more intimate than the touch of their hands. Before she could form a reply, the moment passed. June's posture shifted slightly. His eyes moved back to scanning the garden. The professional guard was back. "Would you like to continue your walk, princess?" he asked, his tone neutral and respectful once more. Sua just nodded, unable to speak. She turned and began to walk slowly along the path, the data slate held tightly in her hands. Her mind was racing. "You are far stronger than you look," the words echoed in her head. They were a seed planted in the quiet soil of her mind. She had spent her whole life being what everyone expected her to be. Soft, gentle, composed. She had built walls of grace around herself. But June had not seen those walls. He had seen something behind them. Something he called strength. She did not feel strong. She felt confused and flustered and shy. But for the first time she wondered if maybe strength was not the absence of those feelings, but the ability to feel them and keep going anyway. She walked, and he followed, a steady presence behind her. The shy princess and the quiet warrior. The gilded cage of her life was still there, but the door felt less locked than it had before. And for the first time she was starting to wonder what lay on the other side. The peace that returned to Celes was a fragile thing. It was like a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark lake. Everyone walked carefully, afraid the ice would break again. The palace was repaired. The broken crystal was replaced. The scorch marks were cleaned. But the memory of the attack remained in everyone's eyes. Princess Sua felt the change more than anyone. The world was no longer a safe and gentle place. It was a place where assassins could drop from the sky. But she also felt a change in herself. The seed that June had planted with his words was growing. You are far stronger than you look. She thought about those words every day. She was still shy. She still blushed easily. But now, when she felt nervous, she would remember the calm, solid look in June's eyes. She would remember the feeling of being safe behind him. It gave her a small new courage. June was always nearby. He was her shadow. He stood outside her door while she slept. He followed her to her lessons. He walked with her in the garden. His presence was no longer a source of nervousness. It was a comfort. She had started to learn the small signs of his alertness, the slight tilt of his head when he heard a strange sound, the way his eyes would pause for an extra second on a moving shadow. She felt like she was learning a new silent language. One afternoon she was in the palace library, a vast room with walls that were not books, but glowing screens of information. She was supposed to be studying the history of galactic trade routes. It was very boring. June was standing by the door as usual. She looked at him. He was looking out the window at the city. "June?" she said. She had started using his name without his title. It felt more natural. He turned. "Yes, Princess? What is your home like, Earth?" He thought for a moment. "It is," loud he said, "and full of color. The sky is blue in the day, not pink like here. The grass is green. There are many people everywhere. They are always moving, always talking." Sua tried to imagine it. A world of blue and green, not silver and pink. A world of noise and movement, not quiet and calm. It sounded chaotic. It also sounded alive. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "I miss the rain." "Rain?" "Water that falls from the sky," he explained. Sua tried to picture it. Water falling from the sky. On Celis, their water came from gentle underground streams. The idea of the sky opening up and letting water fall seemed wild and untamed. Just like him. She was about to ask another question when the door to the library slid open with a sharp hiss. Captain Gia stood there, her face tight with urgency. Behind her were several other human soldiers and a group of Silesian generals. Their faces were pale. "Your Highness," Captain Gia said, bowing quickly. "We have an emergency. The ice was breaking. The Cathar were not finished." The failed assassination had made them angry. Now they were not hiding. They were attacking openly. A fleet of Cathar warships had appeared at the edge of the Silesian star system. They were heading for the capital city. An invasion had begun. Sua was rushed to the Royal Command Center. It was a large circular room deep under the palace. The walls were giant screens showing maps of the city and the space around the planet. The air was filled with the frantic, worried voices of generals and advisors. The quiet hum of Celes had been replaced by the buzz of panic. Her father, the Emperor, stood in the center of the room. He looked old and tired. The generals around him were talking all at once. "We must evacuate the royal family," one said. "We should meet them in space." "Engage the fleet," argued another. "Our ships are for peace, not for war." "We cannot fight them." The Silesian strategies were all about defense and retreat. They had no plan for a real fight. They were like gardeners trying to stop a wildfire with a watering can. Sua stood to the side, her heart pounding. She watched the screens. She could see the red dots of the Cathar ships moving closer. She saw images from the city. People were running. The beautiful, glowing streets were in chaos. She looked for June. He was standing near the wall, his arms crossed, watching the screens. He was not speaking. He was just observing. His calmness was a stark contrast to the panic in the room. One of the generals, a man named Boram, pointed to a map. "Look, they are forming a spearhead formation. They will punch straight through our outer defenses and head for the palace. Our only choice is to scatter our forces, to try and protect the people in the districts." There was a murmur of agreement. Scattering seemed like the only option. Then a low, calm voice cut through the noise. "That is what they want you to do." Everyone turned. June had stepped away from the wall. His eyes were on the tactical map. General Boram looked annoyed. "This is a Silesian military matter, human." June ignored him. He walked to the map and pointed to a narrow canyon that cut through the mountains right behind the palace. They have to come through here to reach the palace grounds. Their big ships cannot land in the city. They will use small landing craft. And this canyon is the only approach for those crafts that is not covered by your city's light scanners. He looked at the Emperor, and then his gaze shifted to Suwa. If you scatter your forces, you will be weak everywhere. They will break through each small group easily. But if you do what they do not expect, if you gather your forces here in this canyon, you can funnel them in. You can make them come to you, one group at a time. It is a perfect place for a defense. The room was silent for a moment. Then General Boram scoffed. A frontal defense? In that tight space? It would be a slaughter. It is a barbaric tactic. June's voice was like steel. It is a survivor's tactic. You are not fighting for a graceful loss. You are fighting to win. To protect your home, the generals argued. They called June's idea reckless. They said it went against all Silesian principles. They said it was too dangerous. Suwa listened to it all. She looked at the scared faces of the generals. She looked at her father's tired face. Then she looked at June. He stood by his idea, calm and sure. He was not arguing for glory. He was arguing for their survival. She thought about what he had said in the garden. Strength has many voices. The generals' voices were loud and full of fear. June's voice was quiet and full of certainty. She took a small step forward. Everyone turned to look at her. "Father," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "I trust Warrior June." The Emperor looked at his daughter. He saw something new in her eyes, a firmness that had not been there before. Suwa continued, looking at June. "Do as he advises." The order coming from the gentle princess was so unexpected that the arguing stopped. The Emperor looked from his daughter to June, and then he nodded slowly. "We will try it. General Boram, gather our forces at the Serpent's Canyon." The command was given. The Silesian guards, trained for ceremony, now had to prepare for a real battle. They looked terrified. June turned to Captain Jia. "Captain, with your permission, I will lead the defense on the ground." Captain Jia nodded. "Granted. Take whoever you need." June did not ask for the human soldiers. He looked at the Silesian guards in the room. They were young and afraid. He walked up to the one who looked the most scared. "What is your name?" June asked. "Taisik," the young guard stammered. "Taisik," June said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You are not going to fight like a Cathar. You are going to fight like a Silesian, but smarter. You know this canyon. You know this city. Your elegance is not a weakness. It is a tool. Now show me how we can use it." He gathered a small group of guards and began giving them simple, clear orders. He did not yell. He did not threaten. He taught. He showed them how to use the environment, how to collapse the delicate archways at the canyon's entrance to block the path, how to redirect the power from the city's decorative light conduits to create blinding flashes of energy. He was not trying to make them into human soldiers. He was helping them use what they already had in a new way. Suwa watched him from the command center screen. A camera drone was following him. He was not staying in the safe command center. He was going to the front line. He was putting himself in the most dangerous place. The first Cathar landing crafts appeared on the screens. They were fast and ugly, heading straight for the canyon, just as June had predicted. The battle began. It was not like the quiet, formal fights in Silesian training. It was loud and chaotic. Energy weapons flashed. Rocks fell. There were shouts and screams, but Suwa saw something amazing happening. The Silesian guards, under June's calm direction, were fighting with a courage they did not know they had. They were using their knowledge of the beautiful, delicate structures to create traps and obstacles. They were not as strong as the Cathar, but they were clever. June was everywhere, a solid gray figure in the middle of the fight. He did not fight with rage. He fought with a focused, protective fury. When a Silesian guard faltered, June was there to block an attack. When a position was about to be overrun, June would appear and hold the line. He was not just a warrior. He was a leader. He was the stone that the river of the Cathar attack broke against. The shy princess watched the screen, her hands clenched together. She was not just watching a battle. She was watching the man who had changed her world, now fighting to save it. And she knew with a certainty that filled her whole being that her trust in him had not been a mistake. The noise in the canyon was a terrible, roaring thing. It was the sound of energy weapons cracking, of rocks shattering, and of desperate shouts. From the command center, Princess Sua watched the battle on the large screens. Her heart was a tight, painful knot in her chest. She saw the flashes of light, the falling dust, the figures running and fighting. But her eyes were always searching for one figure. The one in the simple gray combat suit. June was like the calm center of a storm. He moved through the chaos without panic. He was not just fighting. He was directing. She saw him pull a young Silesian guard, Tasik, back from a falling piece of rock. She saw him point to a weak point in a crystal bridge, and the Silesians, using their knowledge of the structures, made it collapse, blocking a group of Cathar soldiers. He was using their elegance as a weapon, just as he had said. He did not have the brute strength of the Cathar, but he had something better. He had a plan. He had courage, and he was giving that courage to the Silesian guards. They were no longer fighting with fear. They were fighting with purpose. They were fighting for their home. The battle seemed to last forever. But slowly, the red dots on the map representing the Cathar forces began to shrink. The Cathar had expected the Silesians to run. They had not expected a wall. They had not expected June. Finally, the roaring noise from the speakers in the command center began to fade. The last of the Cathar landing crafts that had made it into the canyon were destroyed. The ones still in the sky, seeing the defeat, turned and fled back to their ships in space. A new sound replaced the noise of battle. It was a sound no one on Celes had heard in a very long time. It was the sound of cheering. The Silesian guards, their beautiful armor smudged and scratched, were raising their hands and shouting with joy and relief. They had won. In the command center, the mood changed instantly. The panic and fear vanished, replaced by a wave of disbelief and then triumph. The generals clapped each other on the back. Advisors sighed with relief. The emperor smiled, a real tired smile. Sua felt the tension drain from her body. They were safe. The city was safe. But her thoughts were already somewhere else. She was thinking of the canyon. She was thinking of him. The great hall of the palace was filled with light and sound. It was a victory celebration. The soft chiming music of Celes was playing, but now it was mixed with the happy, loud chatter of people. Silesian nobles and human soldiers stood together, talking and laughing. The air was warm with relief and happiness. Princess Sua stood at the head of the hall next to her father. She wore a gown of deep blue that shimmered like the night sky. She accepted the thanks and the praise from the guests. She smiled and nodded, performing the role of the gracious princess. But inside she felt a strange restlessness. The celebration felt distant, like she was watching it from far away. Her eyes scanned the crowded room, moving past the smiling faces, looking for one person. She found him. He was standing alone by a large arched window that looked out over the city. The window was cracked in one corner, a reminder of the recent attack. June was not in his combat suit. He wore a simple dark uniform of the human delegation. A clean white bandage was wrapped around his forearm. He was looking out at the lights of the city, his profile calm and thoughtful. He was not part of the celebration. He was separate, as he always was. The quiet warrior who had done the most, but asked for the least. Sua's heart began to beat faster. The noise of the room seemed to fade into a soft buzz. She knew what she had to do. It was not something a Silesian princess would normally do. It broke every rule of decorum she had ever learned. But she was not the same princess she had been a few weeks ago. She took a small step away from her father's side, then another. She began to walk through the crowd. The nobles and guests parted for her, their conversations dying down as they watched her. They expected her to stop and talk to a general or an ambassador. She did not stop. She walked past them all. Her gaze was fixed on the man by the window. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, feel their surprise and curiosity, but she did not care. The rules of her gilded cage no longer mattered. June must have sensed her approach. He turned from the window. His dark eyes met hers. He looked a little surprised to see her walking directly toward him. Sua stopped in front of him. The entire great hall had fallen silent. Everyone was watching them. The emperor, Captain Ga, the generals, the nobles. They all waited to see what the princess would do. Sua's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Her hands, which were usually folded so gracefully, felt limp at her sides. She looked up at June. She saw the tired lines around his eyes. She saw the bandage on his arm, a proof of the price he had paid for their safety. She did not look away. She held his gaze. For the first time, she did not feel shy under his direct look. She felt strong. "June," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. It did not whisper. It did not tremble. It carried across the silent hall a single clear note. She did not offer the slow, two-handed gesture of peace. That was a gesture for a princess in a cage. It was a gesture of the old world. Instead, she remembered his first greeting to her. The simple, raw gesture that had come from the heart. The gesture that was more honest than any flowery words or elegant movements. She raised her right hand. She made a gentle fist. Then she placed it firmly over her own heart. She felt the beat of her heart against her knuckles. She looked straight into his eyes and gave a slow, deliberate, and deeply respectful nod. It was a perfect mirror of his own greeting. A ripple of shock went through the Silesian crowd. A princess, performing a human warrior's gesture? It was unheard of. But Sua did not pay any attention to them. Her world had shrunk to this single moment, this single person. For a long second, June was completely still. He looked at her fist over her heart, at the firm set of her shoulders, at the new strength in her silver eyes. The surprise in his own eyes melted away. It was replaced by something warm and deep and real. A genuine, warm smile broke through his usual stoic expression. It was a true smile, one that reached his eyes and lit up his whole face. It was the most beautiful thing Sua had ever seen. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He stood as her equal. He brought his own fist to his chest over his heart and returned her nod. His nod was filled with a respect that was deeper than any formal bow could ever be. The silence in the hall held for one more moment, and then it was broken by the sound of Captain G.A. clapping. It was not a loud, dramatic clap, but a firm, respectful one. Then another human soldier joined in. Then another. And then slowly the Silesians began to understand. They saw not a breach of protocol, but a bridge. They saw their princess honoring the warrior who had saved them all in the way he would understand best. The hall filled with the sound of applause. But Sua barely heard it. She was still looking at June, and he was still looking at her. The shy alien princess was no longer shy around her human warrior. The cage was gone. She had found her voice, and it was strong. She had found her strength, and it was her own.